Hey there, and welcome back to day 2 of the Art Work Living Painting Challenge. I'm so glad to have y'all here today. So I want to recap real quickly what we talked about yesterday. So we went over in my last video the 3 things that form a really solid painting career, a really solid, thriving, successful painting practice. Those 3 things were, first, creating a sustainable studio practice and workflow, one that supports the other areas of your creative life. Second was identifying and growing those revenue streams that are in alignment with your success path, how you've defined success for yourself as an artist. Remember, there are all kinds of ways to do that. Then the third was nurturing and expanding your engaged audience of followers and collectors. So the 3 legs that we're standing on as artists are art, work, and living. If any one of those is out of whack or missing, then it's really hard to thrive as an artist. And my goal for all of you who are watching, who are artists or thinking about being artists, is that you become empowered to define what your success path is for you and go out and go get it. So the purpose of the challenge this week is to get you going on the first leg of that journey, creating that sustainable studio practice and flow. Because without that, nothing else is going to happen. So you got to get in there, you got to do the work, and you got to do it regularly. So we went over the steps in making the painting habit yesterday. So anybody remember those? Brownie points for anybody who can type in one of the 4 things that go into making a painting habit into the comments. So lots of brownie points. If you can remember what some of those are, I'll give you a chance to type some of those in. The things that can make it really easy to get started with the painting habit were setting yourself up for success by making it easy, by having your stuff laid out ahead of time so you don't have to go find everything, prepping your panels, having your compositions figured out, having stuff ready to go so you just dive in to paint. Absolutely, Cindy, cues. Brownie points for Cindy. She got one of them. It was cues. The second step to being ready to go is to get an accountability partner. Find a buddy who's going to hold you accountable and help you stick to the challenge and develop that painting habit beyond the 5 days that we're working on it right now. So step 2 was that accountability buddy. Step 3 was set your goal. Know your why. Know what it is that you want to have a painting practice for. What is it that drives you to paint? What is it that makes you want to become a thriving artist and get rid of that starving artist mindset? Do you want to make more money? Do you want to leave your 9-to-5 job? Do you want to just cover your painting expenses? Do you want to have an impact on the world about a cause that you really love? All of those are reasons that are why. Really good idea to write that down. You don't have to share it with anybody, but kudos if you do. And put it somewhere in your studio where you can see it every day to remind you why you get up to that easel and paint. So when we're talking about those parts of forming the habit loop, the 4 steps to the habit loop, Cindy was right on it when she said the first one, cues. And let me scroll down here and see if we have any others, because I think we have a couple. Yeah, absolutely, Paula, establish cues. And absolutely, Michael, be prepared. So cues are the first thing we're going to talk about in that habit loop. We're going to dive into those pretty deeply today. But I want to just refresh your memory on what the other 3 are. So the second one, after you've established some cues, is to stack those up on top of each other to form a routine. Because if you've got a routine and you repeat it often enough, it'll become the habit. The third part of that is to remember to reward yourself. Remember, positive reinforcement. We've probably all used that with children, with our pets. Guess what? We need to use it with ourselves as well. And it doesn't have to be big. It can be pretty small, but you need to start thinking about what are you going to give yourself at the end of the challenge for participating. What's going to be your Circe? Cersei is a word we use here in the South. Apparently only in the real deep South. It's a small present or gift. You need to Cersei yourself. So Cersei yourself at the end of the week. The last part of the habit loop is to track your progress and reflect on it so that you can figure out what worked and what didn't work and adjust. So that's cues, routines, rewards, and reflection. Those are the 4 main steps. We're going over the first one today. It's one of my favorites. So to really get going on setting the habit of painting, you want to establish cues so that you can train your brain that now is the time to get started. This is a process that works no matter what it is that you're trying to create the habit around. And pro athletes have used these techniques for decades. So we know it works. It's just sometimes we don't do it and we don't necessarily apply it in all the areas of our lives. But the more cues that you can stack up, the more likely you are to actually follow through on this new habit. So cues are reminders for the limbic part of our brain. You know, our brain has multiple layers. It has the lizard brain, which is a real basic reactive sort of brain. And it has the monkey mind, which is the chattering logical part of it. And then it has an even deeper part of the brain that it functions beyond the monkey mind. Now, those terms are ones that I use just to talk about it more easily. They don't refer to anything else other than describing the different parts of our brain. They react in really different ways. So the reptilian part of our brain is the part that keeps us alive and safe. It responds on instinct and emotion and sensory input. So we want to give that reptilian part of our brain lots of sensory input that tells it now's the time to paint. So those things can be anything that appeal to one of those 5 senses. So remember, your senses are, anybody remember? Sight, sound, touch, smell, and taste. So look for things in all of those areas: sight, sound, smell, touch, and taste. So think of those as being reminders that you use to start to paint. We already do this to a degree in daily life. Think about some of the things that you do on autopilot, because that's where we're heading to, is making painting something we can do on autopilot. So we all brush our teeth in the morning. We all brush our teeth in the evening. We all walk into the house and either take off our jacket or take off our shoes. Those are things that are patterns and habits. And it's the thing preceding what we do that is the trigger for that habit. So one of the things that triggers for me to brush my teeth is when I get up in the morning and walk into the bathroom. First thing I do is brush my teeth. The trigger is walking into the bathroom. It's that simple. So it doesn't have to be anything elaborate. In fact, it's probably better if it's not too terribly elaborate. But you want those to be things that you do on a regular basis. So one of the things that will help is if you set a specific time of day to paint. Put it on your calendar, because what gets calendared gets done. Block it out. Make painting important enough that it's on your calendar. Calendars are great triggers. They refer to our sense of time, which is kind of a 6th sense. Then another kind of cue is a floating cue, something that precedes the event. That's that walking into the bathroom so that you brush your teeth. It relates to another action and has to happen. So I have a separate studio space in my house for painting. When I walk into that space, that can become a floating cue and tell me that it's now time to paint. So that helps me set the stage. And remember, yesterday I talked about one of the cues that's been a cue for me since graduate school, and that's the smell of coffee. So when I was in grad school, I made coffee every morning with my mentor. I still make coffee before I start to paint. And it's the smell of the coffee. Used to use hazelnut all the time. Don't as much anymore, but it's still one of those triggers. The smell of the coffee makes me think it's time to paint. I will inevitably wander into the studio if I have a cup of coffee in my hand, because the power of the trigger is that strong. Coffee works in another way as well. Taste. It appeals to taste. So the taste of the coffee I associate with the pleasure of painting. Other triggers that I use that you might want to fold in as well, those are taste and smell. Think about sound. Do you like to listen to music while you paint? I do. And I pick the music according to the kind of mood I'm trying to create in the painting, or what kind of mood I think I need to get into for the painting. Call that mood painting. So think about setting up a playlist that's going to get you in the mood to paint. One of my favorite albums to paint to, because I paint predominantly Southern landscapes, is Greg Allman's Low Country Blues. Actually, almost anything by Greg Allman takes me right deep into the feel of being outside in the low country. So think about picking music that will help you get in the mood and set the stage for painting. So those are 3 senses. Think about smell. Coffee does the smell, does the taste. What about sight? Well, guess what? When you walk into the studio space, that's appealing to sight as well. And the more that you can put around your studio space that's inspirational, whether it's paintings that you're working on that you really like, paintings you've done that you really like, painting or images of paintings by the past masters that you love, put them up on the walls, because all of those things become visual cues that trigger the response to go paint. And nothing tells me to paint more than, and if you can see it, let me move this way. Nope, wrong way. Blank canvas on the easel, big cue to go paint. So sight, sound, hearing, taste, and smell. All really wonderful cues that you can stack up. Think about surrounding yourself as well with people who have the habits that you want to have yourself, because you're the sum total of the 5 to 10 people that you spend the most time around. So if you know other artists who are successful, watch what they do. Look at how they prepare for the day. What are the cues that they use to tell themselves, now it's time to get ready? And then see how you can fold some of those same ones into your studio practice. One of the most important things is that you're consistent, that you do the same cues in roughly the same order. We're going to talk about that tomorrow when we start talking about routine, so that you begin to have those in the order that tells you now it's time to go do whatever it is you're trying to do. So those cues, when you practice them daily, will begin to train your brain to make it easier to get into flow. So flow state, and I haven't talked about that much yet. Flow state is that state of mind, and lots of us who are painters have experienced it. It's that state of mind when you lose the sense of time. It's when you are completely immersed in what you're doing, when you're completely caught up in the process, and you're not making logical, conscious decisions. Those decisions are happening on a subconscious, intuitive level. And that's why we call it flow. Good examples of being in flow state. Anybody a runner? If you're a runner, you frequently get into flow state. There's another term for that. It's called runner's high. And it's a point where you're not having to make conscious decisions anymore. They happen unconsciously. Anybody love to dance? Fabulous example of flow state. Think about it. When you're dancing with somebody else, you can't logically, intellectually process what you're going to do next, or you'll step on their feet. Same thing happens when you're in flow state in painting. You're not intellectually processing. You're processing on a more intuitive, fundamental level. So it goes back to those layers of the brain: the lizard brain, the monkey mind, and the intuitive mind. So we want to get to that third part of the brain and let it take over. We've only got, I think it's 200, I'll have to look that up again. We've only got a set number of decisions that we can make in a day, really limited intellectual decisions. And any of them that we can offload to being intuitive, subconscious decisions leaves us more room for those intellectual decisions. So we want to offload as many of the painting decisions as we can to the subconscious level so that we don't have to think about them and we can paint more in flow. Another good example of being in flow that I think probably most of y'all have experienced at one time or another is the act of driving. How many of you have ever driven to work in the morning or coming home in the evening, and you remember getting in the car with your cup of coffee and your bag, and you start the drive and you're fully conscious of what you're doing. You're thinking about turning left, turning right, and stopping at the stop sign. But really quickly, that becomes autopilot. And you're thinking about something else. Doesn't mean you're a dangerous driver. It means that your subconscious has taken over those driving decisions because you're driving in a routine way that you've done many times before. That's what we're trying to get to, is that routine that lets us be in flow. So stack those cues, get those cues going. I would advise that you make a list of things today. Share those in the Facebook group if you want to, of the things that you already do that make you get in the mood to paint. Because a lot of us get blocked at one time or another. And I know bunches of people who joined the challenge this time did it because they felt blocked in some way. This is how you get yourself out of it. It's a roadmap on the way out and back into flow. So make a list of the 5 senses: sight, sound, smell, taste, and touch, and get one cue for each of those things and put them in an order that makes sense to you. Like, I make my coffee first. I smell it as it brews. I fix the cup of coffee. So I've done smell, and then I'm going to do taste. I walk into the studio. I put on the music. Now I'm getting sound going, right? And I mix my paint. Mixing the paint before I start is the touch part that really gets me in the mood to paint. So figure out which ones work best for you. Make a list, share those in the group. And if you'd like, actually, you can even share a couple in here now if anybody's got some great ones. Let's see. Hey, Marianne. Oh, we've got bunches of people here. Leslie says, flow state, I get into that when I paint to the point I forget what I'm supposed to do outside of painting. Oh, have I ever been there? Definitely. I used to, when my daughter was small, so this is a long time ago. I'm not even going to say how long ago. And I was just out of graduate school and starting to work as a young painting professor. And so I had my studio in my apartment. And I'd put her to bed at night. And she was small, really small. And then I would go into the studio to paint. And I would paint and suddenly find it was 2 o'clock in the morning. And I'd started at about 8 o'clock. That was when I got my studio space outside of my house, because it's not healthy to paint from 8 o'clock to 2 o'clock in the morning and then get up in time to teach an 8 o'clock class. So you can definitely lose all sense of time and forget what else you're supposed to be doing. It's a great example of flow state, Leslie. Yeah, and Sheila says, waking up makes me want to paint. I love that, Sheila. That's perfect. Anybody else got any cues that they already use? Let's see. Yes, excellent. Cool beans. So one other thing, and we've got some time now for any questions that people might have. So if you've got a question about the 5-day challenge or about those steps, those 3 prongs to creating this successful painting practice, the Thrive in Painting practice, drop those into the comments and I'll be happy to answer those before we hop off. I had a couple of questions that came in via email from yesterday, and one was one I know others have as well. And that is about doing a small painting a day for the challenge. Because the challenge focuses on doing a small 20 or 30-minute painting a day for 5 days. And the question was, how's that different from working on a bigger painting for 20 to 30 minutes a day? And both help form the painting habit. But one of the things that working on a small painting each day will do is it will pull you away from getting caught up in the details. So it doesn't matter if you can't start at 20 minutes. If you want to start at 45 minutes and then slowly whittle some time off of it. But when you do a small painting in a really compressed period of time, it forces you to work from the big shapes to the small shapes, from the background to the foreground, to not be what I call inicky finicky. All my students know what inicky finicky means. It's when you get the little tiny brush and go, and you draw it with your paint. When you get inicky finicky at the beginning of a painting, it's going to take you 2 years to paint it. And we're trying to get beyond that. And when you're inicky finicky with a painting, you're not in flow. So I want people to experience that flow state. It may not happen the first or the second day, but it will by the third if you stick with it. So to get into flow state, you have to push yourself beyond that control factor. And that's what doing that small painting will do for you. They don't have to be perfect, they just have to be. So don't think of it as making a complete painting in 20 or 30 minutes or even 40. You are doing the first stage of the painting, but you're going to push to get as much done as you can very quickly. Now, paint mixing time doesn't count. So you can mix your paint up ahead of time and then dive in. The way that's different from working on a big painting is that working on that big painting, in 20 or 30 minutes, you're not likely to get into flow state because you're probably working on a small area over here in the painting or a small area over here. You're not doing that deep dive that allows your intellectual mind, the intellectual part of your brain, the monkey mind, to turn off and let the more intuitive part of your brain turn on. Another phrase for that is left brain, right brain. So the intellectual part of your mind is the left brain. The more intuitive part is the right brain. We want the right brain to turn on. And one of the ways that I know works, because I've used this for so many years, is the 20 to 30 minute challenge. So when you have that compressed period of time, it forces your intellectual brain to turn off, mainly because it can't handle that compressed period of time. And if you allow yourself to make some bad paintings, perhaps, you'll find that you very quickly don't make bad paintings anymore. The first painting that I made when I started doing a daily painting and picked up the painting knives the first time, I'd been painting for 30 years at that point. It was god-awful. It was horrible. It was awful. Can't emphasize how awful it was. I show it to my students and talk about the gloopy painting period because I was using a whole new tool and it was awkward. I was using a new process and it was awkward. But they got better really fast. So there's a gloopy painting period called the messy middle for all of us. Don't let being in the messy middle stop you from pushing through to the other side, because you run into the messy middle in every single avenue that I know of in life. And if you can push through it in painting, that means that the next time you face it in something else, whether it's work-related, child-related, relationship-related, it becomes that much easier to face it. So work through that messy middle and try to stick with like a 20 to 40-minute painting a day, little one, whatever size you want to work on that's small, feels small to you. And think of it as a study. Let go of the preciousness of it. And you'll find yourself making great strides when you do that. So let me see what other questions we have in here. Got some great ones that are coming in. Oh, yeah, I love this one. Joan says she has a special shirt, maybe two, and her apron in her studio room. Well, y'all can see one of mine. I have an apron. This is a relatively new apron, so I'm still getting used to it as one of my cues. I've only had it a year. My other one I had more than 20 years, and it finally just fell apart. But just putting it over my head and tying it behind me makes me feel like I'm ready for the day. So totally get that. And I have a couple of paint shirts that are the same way. And Beverly asks, how do I enter the challenge as a newbie? Well, I'm going to give you the link here in just a second, Beverly, because I don't think I put it up at the top. And I can pop it here into the comments and then edit the caption at the top in just a second. So here we go. And let me give you that link. So if you look at the bottom of the comments, I have thrown that up into the chat roll here so that you can see it. We would love to have you, Beverly. All you have to do to become part of the challenge is to pop your email address into the box for that. Click the button that says to join, and then you'll get the daily prompts as well as an invitation into the free Facebook group. So take a look at that. Yes, Bonnie, you can absolutely still join. So we have a replay page for the past lives, and each of the replay pages also has that prompt for the day in there too. Laurel says, didn't even ever try oils until recently. Surprised they weren't dry after a few hours. No, they take a while to dry, depending on the climate that you're in. This is a humid climate here in Savannah, so it can take a couple of weeks to dry, not usually quite that long. But depending on the humidity level, it can take a little bit longer, and on the thickness of the paint. So it does take a little longer to dry, but that's an advantage in a lot of ways. It means you can go back and fix mistakes really easily. How do I get my painting home when I've been outside? I use a panel carrier. So Raymar makes these fantastic panel boxes that are out of corrugated plastic. Looks like cardboard, but it's not. Super strong. And I can slide my panels down into that and carry them home without them getting messy. I've carried that thing on the airplane and never had a problem with the painting getting damaged in that. So Raymar.com, RAYMAR.com. Great place to get a panel box for that. Yes, Dana, I totally agree. The inicky finicky is exhausting. Laura says the same thing. It's no fun. Don't let yourself get caught up in being inicky finicky. When you feel yourself getting tight, literally tight in how you're holding the brush or the pencil, and if you feel yourself clenching, you're getting inicky finicky, even if you've got a big brush. And at that point, you want to remember to breathe and relax, because if you're tight, you're not going to be able to make a confident mark. And it's kind of counterintuitive, but the tighter you're holding that brush, the less confident the mark is going to be. So do what you need to do to relax before you make the mark, and it'll drastically improve. So Leslie says, can you review briefly what the 3 legs art, living, and work are about? Sure, absolutely. So it's the reason the free Facebook group is called Art, Work, and Living, is that it has been my experience as being a working artist for more than 30 years that the key to being thriving and successful is developing 3 areas of your life, giving them all emphasis. The first is making awesome work. That's the foundation. You know, the rest of it's not going to work if you're not making fantastic work. Make the best work you can. You're not going to be perfect. None of us are. And your work is always going to be developing. So that's one reason when we were talking in the free group the other day, and somebody said something about not showing their work until they reached a certain level, I went, whoa, stop. Because if you wait until you're ready, you're being perfectionist and you're never going to be ready. There's truth to the fact that you want to wait till your work is at least at a level where you're comfortable showing it. But if you're holding back on getting your work out there until it's reaching some idea of perfection you've got in your head, you're holding back too long. So you need to start on that before you're ready. So awesome work is the first leg and the foundation for everything else. The second thing, the work part, is the part of it that has to do with building that big engaged audience and having an impact on the world. It's not just business. People think of it as being business, but the work part is not just business. The business supports the work. Business is strategy and process. And there are lots of different ways to accomplish it. The work part is your success path. So the work part is how you've defined you're going to have an impact. And it could be that you're going to be like some of my students, some who are on right now, whose success path is they want to have an impact on the world around ideas and around causes that they care about tremendously. Whether it's the national parks, or in my case, I did one for a long time that was around Congaree National Park and supporting it, or any other thing that you care about tremendously. That's the work part. Then the business strategies support it. So when artists say they can't do business, I call BS on that, because we can. There are plenty of examples of artists from the past who've been very successful, very thriving, and had strong businesses. It's just that artists frequently are not taught those skills. So how many people went to school, got a BFA or an MFA, and never learned how to market their work? Raise your hand. I'm raising mine really high. I graduated from college with my MFA, from grad school with my MFA, and looked around and went, okay, now what? Because the only work activity that we'd been trained for was to teach at the college level. Well, not everybody wants to do that. So what were other people supposed to do? At that point in time, they didn't teach college art majors how to make a living at art. More schools are doing that now. I taught a course in that at Columbia College for probably 5-6 years before I finally left the college. But that was not taught when I was in school. It's important. It's not antithetical to being an artist. So work is your impact and your success path. You get to define what you want those to be, and then go find the people who are going to teach you the business strategies that you need to know to get there. Because almost everything is doable if you have the right resources to pull from. The third part of that is the creative living. And by that, I don't mean making sure you've got decorator colors on the walls of your home, although that's nice if you do. What I mean by that is that you're feeding your creative life, that you're doing things like you're playing, you're having fun, you're doing activities that are outside of art that give you your brain a break. So, for example, one of mine that has fed my creativity for a long time was horses. I am a horse nut. I'm obsessive about horses. And playing with my horse and working with my horse fed my creativity in ways that I can't even count. It's one of the things that taught me how to let go and how to relax. It's where I developed that process for getting in the flow. Everybody needs to play. In fact, that is one of the questions that I ask on the intake interview with students who are joining my mastermind. So I ask them specifically, what do you do for fun? Do you schedule time in your day, in your week for play? And what is it that you do for fun and play? Because if you're not doing that, that's something I need to address as a coach. So it's that important. It feeds your imagination. Are you reading? Are you going to museums and galleries? Are you hanging out with family and friends? All of that goes into the creative living. The three things go together. They fit like a hand in a glove. If any of them is out of whack, out of alignment, then you're going to have a hard time making art and being a thriving artist. So that's what I mean by the art, the work, and the living. Fantastic question, Leslie. Thank you for asking that one. I can go down a rabbit hole on that though. Sorry about that. Yvonne says, it's talking to Laurel. She says pizza boxes, or you can buy wet paint carriers. The Raymar panel box is a wet paint carrier. Pizza boxes do work, but you have to glue the panel into it in some way, shape, or form so that it won't flip or carry the box flat. With a panel carrier, you can turn the box around and it's not going to hurt it. Ginger says, the main reason I like painting the small paintings is that I can complete it quickly, whether it's 20 minutes or an hour. I feel the need to complete the small painting and forget the time and just complete it. The challenge helps me to focus. Cool, Ginger. I agree. That's one of the reasons I do them. You know, I do the 20-minute paintings fairly frequently, and I'll do them as a warm-up in the studio before I start the day. When I used to teach at the college, when I'm teaching at the college, when I used to teach at the college, that was one of the warm-up exercises we used in the painting class, was the first 20 or 30 minutes of class would do a small 20 or 30-minute painting, because that act loosened everybody up. For anybody who's ever done figure drawing, you've done gesture drawings. Well, a 20 to 30-minute painting is like a gesture drawing. It gets you loosened up and ready for the day. Let's see. Yeah, Leslie says, I just love shutting it all off and using the 20 to 30 minutes to just cover my canvas. That's a great way to do it. It's a great way to start a canvas. You use those 20 or 30 minutes to do the initial block in. Cindy says you can use a wet palette and keep the paint for up to 2 weeks. That really works best with acrylics, Cindy, not with oils, because the oils and the water repel each other. If you have a paint box, like a, oh, now I can't remember the name of it. The white and the blue looks like a Tupperware container, and I'll think of it as soon as we hop off. But if you have a paint box, and I've got a Richardson French mistress over here that does the same thing. If you have a paint box that closes and locks the air out, that will help keep the oils fresh. If you take a Band-Aid and roll it with the pad up and put a couple of drops of clove oil on that and put it inside the paint box, that will help keep the paint from drying out. The trouble with the clove oil is you want to make really sure you don't mix it in with your paint, because it will never dry then. Clove oil diffuses a chemical. There's a chemical in the clove oil that helps to keep the paint from oxidizing. So that's why it slows down that. Don't put paint in freezers. That's a horrible idea of any sort. So I'm not going to spend a whole lot of time talking about that. Hey, Donna. Hey, Beverly as well. Yeah, Sheila says dyslexia helps to remind me that every day I make mistakes, but they're all okay. Absolutely. And after teaching as long as I've taught, I have noticed that the vast preponderance of my students, all through the years I taught college level, who were art majors, who were particularly good once they found their own rhythm, they had dyslexia to a greater or less degree. So dyslexia is really when the right side of the brain, at least it's my theory. I'm not a scientist, so I can't say it for sure. But dyslexia seems to be when people are more right-brained than left-brained. And so I don't think dyslexia is a hindrance at all if you want to be a painter. I think it actually is a help, because it's easier for you to get into flow, ironically. So Marianne says, where do we post the first painting? Post the paint. You can post them either in the free Artwork Living Facebook group, and then I would also urge everyone, post them on your social media. So on your personal Facebook or Instagram accounts. And here's why. Use the hashtag Artwork Living Challenge. That's the #, all one word, Artwork Living Challenge. That way, it's easy for people to find people who are participating in the challenge. But the other reason to post on your social media is that every time we've done this, participants sell their work. Now, I obviously cannot guarantee you're going to sell your paintings if you're in the challenge, but every single time, people end up selling their paintings. Not everybody, but many people do. And here's why. Here's the secret sauce. By posting your paintings consistently on your social media for 5 days straight, the social media algorithms begin to show them to more people, not just the people who've liked your profile. And when you broaden your audience, then you get a bigger response. When you paint and people see it consistently for 5 days straight, they go, oh, Susie so-and-so is actually doing this. She's a painter. Maybe I need to go look at what she's doing. And they'll frequently become engaged with what you're doing, ask you questions about it. You need to respond and perhaps purchase. So post your paintings on your own personal profiles in Facebook and Instagram. Use that hashtag so everybody else can find you, and respond when people ask you questions about your painting. See if you can't sell it without being salesy. It's the secret sauce to selling without being salesy, is to show up consistently. Great question, Marianne. Marguerite says, just listened to 30 minutes of January's day 2. Kept thinking, darn, she's consistent. Yes, I've got this one down. It's one of my favorite things to teach. And Laura says, get in nature, take photos. Those are great things to do to get ready. So if you are part of the membership, our membership group, they got an extra challenge to paint outside. So if you're an Artwork Living community member, meaning in the paid membership, I'm hoping that you're getting outside and painting plein air, because that really will take your painting to the next level, because then you're working on your direct observation skills. Bonnie says, I'm self-taught and now I feel I'm getting too old to get out there. Absolutely not. Let's stop that one right there, Bonnie. One of my favorite stories to share is about a friend of mine who passed away at 92 this past year. So she was a young widow with, I think she had 5 to 6 children. I think she had 6 kids. When her husband died, they were all small, and she had to go to work to support them. She'd been a painter. She'd shown some in the city, and she went to work for the city running the arts component of the Parks and Recreation Department. She worked at that until she was 65 and retired. The day that time flipped the switch. She started her full-time painting career at 65. Got a studio space in one of the spaces downtown. Painted every day. She treated it like a job. She showed up at 8:30. She left at 3:30 for years. Now that shortened a little bit as she got older, but she was still painting about a week before she passed away. So she had a career that spanned 30 years that started when she was 65, and it was extremely successful. She was the top-selling artist in the gallery that we were both in. So it is not ever too late. Your age does not have to get in the way of your getting out there and becoming a thriving artist. You also get to define how you think of success. So if replacing your income is too big a goal for you to think about to begin with, back it down to something that feels like a stretch but still attainable, and go for it, because there's no better time to do it than now. So don't worry about how old you are, how much time has passed, where you are in the stage of life that you are right now. There's no bad time to get started. It's just the time to start. Do what is going to make your soul feel good. Define success for yourself and then dive in. So let us know how that goes. Cindy says, my favorite painting buddy is 89 years old and going strong. Thank you for sharing that. Backs up what I said. Exactly. So yeah, don't let age stop you. I would say that 2/3 at least of my students are in the age range of 50 to 70. And they're starting their thriving painting practice now and doing great. So age, don't let that be something that stops you. It's the start of your next career path or your next success path. And lots of us went to art school at a time when they didn't teach people how to thrive as artists. So people left and became teachers, they became doctors, they became lawyers, they became mothers, they became other things because that was where they were at that stage in life. And lots of people come back to art when their children go off to school, when they reach a point where they go, it's time for me now. So if you're at that stage, seize it and go for it. Thank you, Eleanor. The Masterson box. I knew that somebody would remember what it is. Fantastic. Yeah, Leslie says she used to do the 20-minute exercise in her life drawing classes, and that was gesture drawings, doing a quick gesture drawing. So think of the 20-minute, 30-minute painting exercise as kind of like a gesture drawing as well. Yeah, I have a hard time sometimes remembering Masterson box. I don't know why I freeze up on that one so often. And as Sheila says, and I think Sheila is the one that came up with this, somebody did, I'm pretty sure it was Sheila in my class, that if you use those felt little dots that go on the feet of furniture to keep things from getting scuffed, you can stick that into your Masterson box and put the drops of clove oil on that. Works like a charm. Absolutely like a charm. The Stay Wet palettes are great for acrylics. Now what will work with acrylics the best is to get a tray, and you can use the Stay Wet palette the same way, and put a layer of 3 to 4 paper towels, shop towels down, get them soaking wet. Then put a piece of palette paper on top of that. Wax paper will work too. And then work with your acrylics on that. They'll stay open almost all day when you do that. And it's because of the humidity, the dampness, and the chill that the water gets. But those paper towels have to be sopping wet. You don't want the water to come through to the top of the palette paper, but it needs to be wet enough that it's going to really soak those towels. So you can work with that, and it'll keep acrylics open really long. Brianna says, being new to watercolor, these 20-minute paintings have been so helpful. I'm so glad. Yay, and just having fun is always great. Fantastic. Tori says, Bonnie, my grandmother took up painting in her late 70s. You're never too old. Perfect answer. Totally get that. And Joan says her dad started painting plein air in his 70s and became quite good, and he had never done art before. Yeah, and as Sheila points out, she's 73, and she has developed quite a career for herself here. Sheila, how many paintings do you have in your National Park series? I can't remember. But Sheila is going to work on getting hers, collaborating with the National Parks Foundation and getting hers out there. Sigrid says, 20 minutes feels more like 5 when I'm painting plein air. The great outdoors can be a bit overwhelming, and prioritizing is difficult. She feels new to plein air painting and challenged. Yeah, the best thing to do when you're outside is to do, when you're first getting started, do a little bit more observational prep work. Do a thumbnail sketch first before you get started, so you have that to anchor yourself. And you don't have to count that as your 20-minute painting time. Give yourself 10 minutes to do a thumbnail first. Look through a viewfinder, and then mix your paint, and then dive into painting so that you're going through stages and steps. Go back to Sigrid, I think that there's a blog post on my website about that. Yay, Bonnie, you have plenty of time. Go for it. Allison says, yep, I became a computer programmer, but I still paint. Absolutely. I think all of the people that I know that majored in it and then did something else to make a living still do it or still think about doing it. Because the reason that you did it in the first place was not just to make a living, it's because it's part of your gut and it's part of the way you express yourself. And if you don't get it out, then it kind of stagnates inside, and that's not healthy. So everybody, even if they're not ready to give up that 9 to 5 yet, needs to find a way that they can incorporate the painting into their daily life so that that need and desire to create doesn't stagnate inside, because the world doesn't like, life doesn't like stagnation and entropy. And when things stagnate, when they stay still, it's not a healthy situation. So absolutely get it out there, no matter what it is that you're doing. And computer programming is an art form. I'm a computer nut. Yeah, Sheila says she was an art major in the 60s and then got a computer information, BS and MS. Same kind of deal. Absolutely. Bonnie says, I've never painted outside, always in my studio. Give it a try sometime, Bonnie. It's fun. I love doing it. It's actually my favorite place to paint. So I think I've covered all the questions. I just want to give you a quick recap of what we covered today so that everybody goes off knowing exactly what they need to do. We talked about triggers. We talked about how you can use triggers that appeal to your senses, because that gets in on that reptilian level of your brain. It's a perceptual thing. So you want triggers that are related to sight, sound, smell, taste, and touch. So I want you to list those out and come up with a cue for each one of those so that you can begin to layer those into your painting process and develop that daily painting habit. And remember that the painting habit leads to making awesome paintings, and that's the first leg of the Artwork Living stool. Remember, the stool is what's foundational, it's what is stable and leads you to a stable, thriving, successful career. So you want to make awesome art. You want to identify what your success path is for you to make an impact on the world, and then find the business resources and strategies that are going to get you there. And you want to have and create a creative life. You want creative living folding in there so that it feeds the other two things. So that's all for today. Happy painting, everyone. Get out there and do that painting. Share it into the free Facebook group if you want to, and would love to see lots of those on social media as well. Take care, everyone. Bye-bye for now.